Wayne Doorband here for the bi-weekly NTP C.E.E.D webinar huddle that we hold here at our Northern Colorado headquarters in Loveland, Colorado, both live here at our site and also going out over the web to those of you that are watching. Enjoy what we have for you today. Hi, how's everybody doing? This is Wayne Doorband here for Economics in Action. We're actually at a new location today. We're in Berthoud, Colorado, which is right down the road from Loveland, where we've been previously. We actually have a cool new little office that we're working out of with a little studio. Move the camera around the room, just show our audience kind of what we've got here. There we go. We got Jonah sitting there and Janine, and you can kind of see it's set up a little bit like a coffee house. There's Deb over there, and Brian's on the camera. So that's kind of where we're at today, and we know we're talking to you all around the world. I can see we've got Mark on here from Bangladesh, and I see that Dawn's on from, I think she's out at our office. So Dawn's maybe got a little group of people there. I think she was going to have a little party around this, and so I know there's actually we have some new interns there that are working for their first day today and doing some stuff. So anyway, excited to have everybody here. I am really excited to have Grahame Rees as our guest today. Grahame, good to see you. Grahame and I met, what, a year and a half ago or so now, maybe even 2 years. Time flies.
It's exactly 12 months ago, Wayne, that I was in San Diego, and you were on the stage and talking about what you're up to, and I went straight away, gee, I got to meet this guy. He's somebody I need to talk to.
Awesome. Wow. Shows you I'm thinking of time. I was thinking it was 2 years. I'm actually glad it's only a year because we talked about a whole lot of things we wanted to do, and we haven't gotten a lot of them done yet. We're gonna get that done here. We'll set that as a goal for the next year. Anyway, we're excited to have everybody here. I wanted to say that we're having a really cool Economics in Action webinar 2 weeks from now. We just created a relationship that we formalized yesterday with a guy named Dan Pfeffer, who is going to be our market farmer out at Mountain Sky Ranch. And Janine, who you just briefly saw, is going to be working with him as we create a new market farm presence. And actually, you saw Jonah sitting over here by me. I just met Jonah today, actually accidentally in a cafe that we have near here. And he's got a really cool operation going over in the greenhouses that we used to be in Loveland. And maybe we can convince him to come on with us at some point. So anyway, we've got some really cool stuff coming up, and really excited to just get into this with Grahame. And so Grahame, you ready to get going here?
I'm ready to get going. Wayne, seeing as you showed where you were, I thought I probably should just, whilst it's not exciting, show everybody what it looks like on a Thursday morning in Australia out the window. I'm not sure whether all I can see on my screen is the image of me, not the picture, but that's hopefully we can see a little bit. There we go. So this is in the town of Bathurst. It's a little cloudy here this morning, but it's Thursday morning, and I always like to say to everybody in the US that for you guys, the world is not going to end today because we're already in tomorrow.
Yeah, you're 18 hours, I think, different than us, right? Is that right?
That's right. It's 7:20 a.m. It's 7:20 a.m. in the morning, and it's Thursday morning. So really exciting to be able to talk to you today using this amazing technology.
Yeah, and just real quick, because I love to hear about new things. You and I were talking right before about you found a new presentation platform. What was that again? Zoom? Was it? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for a long time I've been using Skype for a long time, and Google Hangouts, and you know, Google Hangouts are great for this purpose. But when you want to do smaller interviews, one-on-one or small groups up to 25, I think it is, it's Zoom, ZOOM.us, and it's a neat little tool if you want to interview people, because down the bottom you just press record, and when you finish it downloads the audio, and so it's something that I've been investigating because I'm going to start a podcast fairly shortly, and I think I'll use that platform.
Awesome. Well, we've got kind of a series of questions that we've already talked to Grahame about, and so we're going to go through a little interview process. Grahame and I have been able to visit and be together, and I think we'll be kind of having fun with each other. So I'm just going to get started with it, Graham. We get into these questions if you don't mind.
Fantastic. Let's go.
All right. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your business and sort of your life situation. I think Deb's got some slides that she'll show while you're talking about this.
Yeah, look, I sent through Deb a whole lot of slides that kind of are a mix of my life, and so as we're going through them, I'll talk about them. I grew up and spent most of my life in outback Australia in a place called Ivanhoe in Western New South Wales, and so we used to say it was centrally located. You know, it was well, you guys are in miles, but it was about 600 or 700 miles from Sydney, and about the same from Melbourne, and about the same from Adelaide, and a little bit further to Brisbane. And so we could go to any capital city as long as we drove for about 10 hours. And so we ran sheep out there. I was a fourth generation. My great grandfather had taken up that country, and then my grandfather, and then my dad, and after I went to college, I went back there. So unfortunately, I didn't come up with a photo where it looked really good, but it doesn't. That's actually in the worst of the drought in 2002, and so you know, that's probably a 1 in 20 year experience we'd have where it gets that bad. But you know, I do have images, but they're not digital, where I've had a four-wheeler parked in the same spot, in a similar spot to that, where it was bare dirt, and then the four-wheeler, you couldn't see it for grass. And I used to actually show that photo to people in different orders, and some people would say, gee, you degraded the country, and some people would say, gee, you've recovered the country. So images are so important, I think, in telling a story about where we've been. And we mainly ran sheep out there. We could run 10 sheep to the acre, so you know, it was a lot of land. I had an aircraft to be able to get around it, but when I was at school, I didn't do very well at school. School wasn't a place where I particularly enjoyed very much outside. I enjoyed lots of things outside 9 to 3:30, but not that period in between. But one of the reasons I stayed at school as long as I did is I wanted to go to a college called Longreach Pastoral College, and it wasn't your typical university. It wasn't your typical college. It was very practically based, and so Longreach is in far western Queensland, for those who don't know. And so again, you know, in the outback, in fact, it's where the Outback Hall of Fame is, if you ever visit Australia. And so I had 2 amazing years up there, because we get to do the theory, but then we'd actually go and do the practical, and I just so enjoyed that. So I came back from Longreach and then became part of the family farm, and I'll talk about these images that are on there in a second. Came back to the family farm and participated in that with my 2 brothers and my family. And as time evolved, we went through. We had 3 different stations there, and so my brothers, they had one each, and I had one, and I came to a point in when was it? 1983. I was living on my own, and I had glandular fever or some sort of virus, and got to a point where I really needed to get an employee, and so I rang this girl up to see if she could help me, and one of the questions I said is, can you cook? And she said, I can open tins and boil water. And anyway, that girl came and worked for me, and she turned out now she's my wife of since 1986. So Roz and I, you know, we spent a lot of years working together on the farm, and we then, in 2002, we decided to move to Bathurst, because one of the problems in outback Australia is you need to educate your children, and you either send them to boarding school or you need to move for a while. So we actually decided to move for 3 years, get the kids to another level, and then we'd go back. But the drought bit harder, and and so had to find something else to do. But and in that process came a whole new line of business. Those pictures there, they're taken. In 2013 we did a 7-week odyssey in the US, and we travelled from Idaho up into Montana, and then all the way down through Wyoming, Colorado, down into New Mexico, and ended up in San Diego. And so I was looking at those images, and I just so want to be there. That's on the Henry's Fork in Island Park, and it's become, fly fishing's become a passion of ours, and maybe I can explain a little bit more about that when we get further in the call. But when we moved here, what happened was in 1999. I don't know whether, Deb, you can go to another photo. There should be an image. Actually, that image there, while you're on that, is this is how we ended up in the US. I watched a video or a movie called Where the Yellowstone Goes, and if you haven't seen it, you can go and look at the trailer on YouTube and get that movie. But that movie is a float trip down the whole length of the Yellowstone, and where there's no dams, and so they did this float trip down there, fly fishing and just looking at the environment and various things. And it was made by a film producer, Hunter Weeks. And it's kind of funny how things happen. But I friended Hunter on Twitter, and then when we're in the US, he said, well, if you're in Bozeman, so are we. And so that's actually a photo of me with Hunter and his wife Sarah in the community garden, and that was fascinated me. It fascinates me what's happening. It's happening here in Australia and obviously over there. But this beautiful community garden where everyone pitches in and works and actually then uses the produce. The image down the bottom is actually my daughter's book. So my daughter Ashley is there's a whole story behind her. She's a bit of an entrepreneur, and I always wanted to write a book, but she beat me to it, and she wrote a book, How to Use the Power of Social Media. So that's the story of that picture. But my life changed in 1999 when I met a fellow called Bud Williams, and Bud came out here to Australia. If you haven't heard of Bud Williams, then you should have, and you need to really go and look up Bud. It's quite interesting, because just right now in California there's a symposium going on, and it's a big coming together of all the stockmanship people. There's Temple Grandin and Whittier Bud and Richard and Tina Williams. So Tina's Bud's daughter, Richard McConnell, and but Bud came out here in 1999, and I suppose just like everybody else, I thought I've been working livestock all my life. What could I learn off somebody? But I just trusted the people that brought him out here, and I went along to Bud's workshop, and I walked out of there 2 days later and realised I knew nothing and needed to start again. And one of the lucky things for me, Wayne, was Bud actually came home with me for 4 days, and so we became good friends, and got involved teaching low-stress stockmanship skills. And there was a fellow here, Jim Lindsay, who'd been teaching dog training schools for a lot of years, but it wasn't fashionable to be teaching stockmanship. But after Bud came, there was a lot of interest in that, and so teamed up with Jim and 4 or 5 other guys, and that was in 2002. And gee, I've had over 2,000 people go through my program, let alone the other guys. So it's been it's quite remarkable, I think, the stockmanship school, and we do it a little differently. They're my 2 partners. Jim Lindsay's the person on the right, and Rod Knight on the left. And I just touch on the stockmanship school a bit before I go to the KLR marketing. But with the, I think the thing about the stock handling school is there's two parts to it in the way I see it. There's skills, but there's also the attitude and the way people are around animals. And so a lot of our training it's practically based, but we take people through a process where the paradigm is shifted right across and they can go and implement it right away. And then in 2002, Bud came back to Australia and he's just wandering around with us doing some stock handling, and he said, you know, I got this marketing stuff that I think would work really well here, and if you guys want to learn it, he said, I'm running a school in Spokane in Washington. And so we thought, gee, this is pretty interesting. We each had businesses at the time, and we said, well, let's livestock businesses, and so let's go and see what we can learn for ourselves. Well, we got over there, and Bud just revealed something that we could see was the missing link in a livestock business. You know, I guess in the US, but here in Australia, we've got really good at production. You know, production is something we're really good at, but we can become quite poor at marketing. And when we understand that marketing isn't about price, that marketing is about profit, and there's a whole lot of things that go with that. So Rod and I actually stopped over there, and Bud said, you know, you guys are going to teach this stuff because I'm not coming to Australia again. And so we went back to Texas with him. That was an interesting drive. We had an 11-hour lecture down to Wyoming. We stayed a night, and then we drove another 23 hours. Bud drove the whole way and lectured the whole way. And so it was a unique experience that we had, and out of that came the KLR marketing school. So again, you know, that we were only adding up the other day, you know, that we ran our first school in 2004, and we're 10 years running that now, and we've, again, there's been a couple of thousand people through that program. So, you know, there's a couple of things that keep me busy now, doing stockmanship schools and the marketing schools, and then all the other side interests in between, Wayne. It just for anybody who's interested, they could, and they wanted to find out a little bit more about what we talk about. You know, that CD, what is KLR all about? It's actually available also as a podcast, and all people need to do is go to klrmarketing.com.au and just put their name and email, and it'll automatically give them that podcast. If you want the CD, we'll mail that to you as well. But it's 68 minutes where we really were interviewed by somebody talking about, you know, the principles of what we talk about in the marketing, and Bud's marketing principles, and we've kept very, I suppose, correct to what Bud taught us way back then. We've developed it and turned what was a 2-page handout into a massive folder, but so people can grab that if they want. What else you got there? What else you got there, Wayne, on the screen? Have we got any more images? Oh, there we go. So that's us at a school. That, you know, we like to have about 50 there at an audience, but actually that one had about 81. So sometimes the audiences grow, but we kept pretty busy doing those schools.
Graham, stop for just a second. What's the biggest mistake that you see people making in their livestock marketing?
Okay, that's a good question, Wayne. I can go anywhere. I could go to the coffee shop there and sit down with a few ranchers, and I'm going to say, so what's the problem with your industry? And they're going to tell me, well, we need more money. It's the prices. Even in the record prices that you've got there now, I actually had somebody in the US say, you know, I can get $3,000 for a cow-calf unit, but I don't know what to do. I said, well, you want to be careful what you wish for. So, you know, we focus on the wrong things. I talk about 3 arenas of marketing. You know, the product arena. The product arena is where you're actually got, say, Wayne's T-bone steak on the shelf in the supermarket. You've got the alliance arena where Wayne's got his organic friends and you're managing a product. And then we've got the commodity arena where most people are, and in the commodity arena we're price takers. So where should we focus? We should focus on our costs, and that's the biggest mistake people make, is they don't even know what it costs to produce their product, let alone be able to manage profit into their business.
Well, that's so insightful, but it's also something that I've observed. It isn't just obviously in livestock agriculture, it's across the board in agriculture, and then frankly it's probably the case in most business. And one of the things that I found 20 years ago or more was that so many farmers here in the US market the way they do for one reason. It's the way my dad did, it's the way my grandpa did. I mean, there's just tradition that is hard to fight. So anyway, that just a little bit of a side. Why don't you keep going, and then we've got a whole bunch of fun questions. So
well, it is tradition, and I think we turn marketing, Bud's principles turn marketing on its head. And so the thing that I say to people is you've got to forget what you paid for animals, because you can't change that. And so we've got to get off that price thing. I haven't written it yet, but I want to write an article. Higher prices could send you broke, because I just touch on that a little bit more, because and that's what we're going to see in the US. We're seeing these high prices, and I'll guarantee if you did a benchmark against most of those ranchers, their costs have gone up with it. And then when the price drops, the costs won't come back because they've committed to finance or those sorts of things. So I think the other thing as ranchers and farmers is what's our, you talk to people and you say, so what do you do? And they go, oh, I'm a cattle producer, or I'm a sheep producer. Well, actually, you're a grass producer. If you're running livestock, you're running grass, and that's the skill that you've got to get really good at, is managing your grass, because that's the thing that will give you production. It's the thing that's going to give you manage your risk as well. So those images there that on the screen, that's actually out on a 4 million acre station in the Northern Territory where I did a little bit of work. We gathered up about 3,000 head of cattle, and that's you don't get too many ranches over there of 4 million acres, but it's some pretty big country out there. So one of the great things that I enjoy is teaching young people. And I had a young person, this is in Tasmania, I had a young person approach me last year, and he said, look, would you run a low-stress stock handling school for teenagers? And I said, sure. And so I had 27 of these young guys, and I tell you what, they loved it. They lapped it up. They learned so quickly. And I think we underestimate how important it is to get those kids at an early age and educate them and show them some skills that they've got for life. When they graduated and I gave them their certificate, I said, these skills you've got here will get you a job for life, because they're skills actually, when you walk out of the stockmanship school, they're skills that you got for life, and you're probably in the top 10% of stockmen in the world. So to get young people and nurture young people, I think's a huge thing. So I've done a little bit of that, and it's just kind of a bit of fun. It's not my main business, but it's always good fun, and you can have fun with kids. They're different to educate, but I learned very early you've got to have some funny videos, and that keeps them going.
In this picture, Grahame, if you had to make a guess in the way you see agriculture or livestock agriculture in Australia right now, what percentage of these kids will be still in the ranching business 20 years from now?
Look, in their minds, probably most of them. Unfortunately, circumstances, older generations, they kind of say, oh no, you don't want to come home, you need to go off to the city. The passion that I see in the young people, the millennials, the young people for agriculture today is quite amazing. I mean, they are just so passionate about it, and I always say to them, look, everybody talks. You probably have it over there. Everybody talks about, the young people these days do this and the young people that. I tell you what, these young people, we got to get out of their way and let them have a crack, because they are passionate. And it's not, it used to be just boys, but I tell you what, some of these young women in agriculture are also making huge marks. So that next image you had there, one of the things we have after we run our marketing school, which is a 2.5-day program, we put together a mastermind, because what we recognised is that people need support, and so we have quite a group all over Australia and even into South Africa where we're supporting people to actually implement what they learn. And so, get away with those people, different things. We run mastermind days, we take bus trips, we have mastermind weeks, and so we get out and do field trips and get out and really discuss it. I think I heard a quote by he's actually a professor from over there in one of your universities that spoke at the International Rangeland Conference in Townsville. And it was really interesting, because all the speakers were eminent speakers. They all had great PowerPoint presentations. This guy, he had no tie on, his shirt was hanging out, and he said, "You scientists out there," he said, "the thing you're missing is getting out there and walking with the people that are getting their hands dirty. You need to get out in the field and walk with those people in their field, and you will learn so much from them." And he said, we're losing all the indigenous knowledge we've got in agriculture today. So, I really think when you can get people together and get a collective, and you get them out talking about their farm or other farms, it makes a huge difference to, that's how we learn. We always learnt that way, I think.
Do you see that the millennials today, or the younger folks that you're working with, understand that and realize if they can spend as much time as they can with somebody who's been ranching for 40 years, that's worth just a huge amount to them? Do they get that?
A lot of them do. I mean, they want to get out and get that experience. So if I'm running a stock school somewhere, and there's a young person I've met, I say, "Would you like to come along? I'm not going to charge you, just come for free." And they come along, and they, I've been doing this for 10 years, so some of those now are probably married and got kids, and you run into them and they go, those 2 days changed my life, because we talk a lot about attitude, and we have a little poem, "Attitude is Everything," and we give everybody a copy of that. And it's amazing how many of those people 10 years later, they say, "I've still got that on my wall at home. Every time I get stressed, I go and have a look at that and really understand, it's my attitude I got to correct." And so that's what's so fun about these kids. When I'm doing a stock handling school, I'm also talking to them about, nothing's a problem. It's only in your head, and how they can correct that with their right attitude.
Right. Well, I think we're just about done with the slides. Let's get into some of these fun questions that I had here for you. And then anybody that's out in the audience, if you've got questions, go ahead and put them into the chat box, and we'll make sure we get them asked to Grahame. So I got this whole list here. I'm going to just sort of go through. You've actually answered some of the things here already, but give me one event from your youth. So it's a good transition. We just talked about youth. One event from your youth that you remember that caused you, really was a big reason why you're pursuing the life path that you're on.
I think we're embedded from a very young age. I'm told that my grandfather used to pick me up and in his truck and take me out when I was still in nappies. Like, it's that long ago, I don't even remember it. But I think at a young age, I was involved in the farming. I was involved in actually being given responsibility. I could drive at the age of 5, I think it was, and even though we had horses, we used to use vehicles a lot, and then I had a motorbike. But to be able to, you know, at the age of 7 or 8 or 9, be given that responsibility and trust, and be able to bring a mob of stock in, or drive the tractor, or do something, I think you know, you get that you get that connection with the land. And that was probably why going to boarding school was such a shock to me, because I was just this dumb kid again. You know, I wasn't. In my mind, at 10, I was an adult. You know.
Right. Well, that makes sense. That's great. So let's say that take yourself back to when you were 15. You know, a teenage boy, and it was a beautiful Saturday afternoon. What would we find you doing? What would you be up to?
Well, you weren't supposed to leave the school grounds, but I was sneaking out the back and over the back fence with probably a couple of mates, and we were off down the river, and you know, I guess, you know, we were either fishing or exploring or adventuring, and I think that's something, Wayne, that stuck with me all my life. I am a bit of an adventurer. I was always the kid on the school excursion that everyone said got lost, but I wasn't lost. They just lost me. I'd gone where I wanted to go. I didn't follow the group. I've never been somebody to follow the crowd. So if everybody was going to watch the football, I was going down the river to go fishing, you know, and that's just how I've been.
By the way, I'm going to segue just a tiny bit, and this is for you and me to talk about later, but I don't think when we've been together that I've shared with you my fly fishing passion also, and really the story behind where that came from. So I can relate to that totally, and we'll chat about that another time. And I actually have a very strong relationship with Bozeman, Montana, related to that fly fishing side of things. I spent 6 weeks in a summer in Bozeman, and had a chance to fish with some of the most amazing sort of avocational and professional fly fishermen in the world, and fished the Gallatin and the Missouri, and you know, any little stream that we could. And we were there for a conference, but we were able to get out fishing just about every day, and it was a pretty amazing experience. So
well, yeah, we'll indulge in our passion just for a minute. Because I think you talk about what changed my life, and I think, you know, one of the big changes for me in my life was when my wife Roz got breast cancer in 2009, and you know, I think it was her that was affected medically, but you know, you're a partner, and so it was a journey that we did together, and it wasn't something that she enjoyed, but I think, again, you know, she's a bit of an adventurer as well, and so even that we treated as, you know, an adventure. She created her own mindset in and around how she was going to cope with that, and when she got through the recovery and got through all of that, she realized, you know, I've got to get out and do something, and so she's the one that took up fly fishing first, and she took it up, and she'd been fly fishing for a couple of years before, you know, I actually decided that I wasn't going to learn to fly fish, because I just normal fish, because I just thought, well, you know, that's her thing, and I don't want to take it away from her, but. We went to the US in 2012. That was our first trip, when Hunter had kind of conned us into this drift boat trip idea. And we went into Orvis in San Francisco, and this guy goes, "You're not going fly fishing?" That's rubbish. $1,500 later, and I was a fly fisherman. But oh boy, you know, my wife Roz would live in Bozeman. We fished. We stayed in the Missouri for a week. We fished the Gallatin. We fished the Madison upper and lower, and we went to High Spring Creek, and that was an awesome experience. But anyway, we could talk for hours.
We'll go to that another time. We'll go to that another time.
Do that another time.
Yeah. So what does the term sustainability mean to you? Our audience is really, that's a term we just really use a lot. And I ask this question all the time, and I've gotten 20 different answers. So it's always fun. When you hear that term, tell me what it means to you as in context of your life.
You know, I think sustainability has become, you know, it was a great word and it has a great meaning, but it's become jargon, and I think it's used a lot by bureaucracy and politicians, and you know, sustainability. What is sustainable? I'm a little bit. I don't want to be sustainable. You know, I don't think I don't want to be. Because to me, the meaning of sustainable is to keep things the way they are. Well, we don't need to keep things the way they are because we haven't done that for a long time. I mean, for a long time we've degraded a lot of land. For a long time, you know, things have gone the other way, and so I want to see things improving. I think it's really important that, you know, we're doing things, if we're talking about managing the land, we're doing things that is going to build soil and is going to build life in the soil. We're going to do things that's going to build, you know, the things that are growing on our land and improving that. And the same with our animals. You know, we've got to be, genetics is a funny thing. We've got to be continually adapting and changing. But I think the human being also, it's pretty boring being sustainable, and you know, sitting back and collecting a government check every week is probably sustainable, but it ain't much fun.
Right. And by the way, it is sort of cool how the old movie word simpatico you and I are, because I've stopped using the word sustainable. I use regenerative now. I want people to think about what I do and we do as being regenerative, and that's just sort of the same thing you're saying, using different words. But yeah, sustainability means staying the same to some people, and that's certainly not what we want. So let's go on to maybe just a little bit more on who your influences have been. You've mentioned several, and you've mentioned your wife, and you've mentioned Bud and others. Go back to your youth now again, and give us a person who really had a major life impact on you from your time as a youth, and again, it could be anybody that you can think of.
Well, I think it, you know, I did touch on my grandfather and my grandfather and my father, and I think they instilled in me, you know, some principles around, I think, work ethic and how things should be done, and you know, get out of bed and do a good day's work, and I think that was so important. And I think sometimes, you know, it's difficult for young people because they don't necessarily have a role model. I was lucky; I had a great role model. You know, that said, you know, when I was at college, I think one of the great lessons for me was also getting to go and work on different stations, and sometimes it was actually the people that weren't that great at managing that you learnt more, because sometimes you got to see the way not to do things, and you go, well, I'll never do that. You know, it's not always because you know, your dad's never. It's amazing how much smarter your dad gets as you get older.
Right.
Not very smart when you're 18.
Right. No, that's true. And by the way, again, I said this earlier, but I'm going to say it again. You can also, I think, look at a man or a woman and look at who they are by those around them. And I've had the opportunity to be with your daughter, Ashley, independent of being with you. And, you know, she is such an amazing reflection of you, and so much for you to be proud of. And I would think that if she was asked a similar sort of question, she'd say the same thing about you, and as you just said about your dad and your grandfather. So, I mean, that's just a kind of, when you get to the point in life we're at, where we're a little bit older, it's nice to be able to see that kind of thing.
It is, Wayne, and actually, she was on a live webcast recently where she actually said that, and I was like, oh, that's pretty rewarding, probably more rewarding than anything. And that's just to finish off on that. Bud, I said to Bud Williams in 2010. I mean, for those that don't know, he passed away in 2012. But in 2010, I said to him, I said, you know what, Bud? Other than my dad, you've had the most influence on my life, and and he still does today, even though he's passed, because his principles and the way he lived his life was just timeless. And so there's, you know, I never lose that every day.
Great. Well, and that just answered was going to be one of my next questions, which was who was a person outside of family that had a big impact on you. But so I think you've answered that. Let me go the other direction, and maybe you've already answered this. Give us one memorable negative experience that you've had in your life that at the time didn't seem good at all, but truly you can look back now and has really molded you and helped you become a better person.
You know, I guess I find myself a little bit unique in that when negative influences come in my life, I kind of let them go, and so when I search for that, I can't really find it. But certainly at boarding school, at the age of 14, I was probably, you know, the smallest kid in the school, and I don't know, probably today they call it bullying. Back then it was just whatever it was, and you learn to cope with it. But I saw this quote in a school diary, and this quote said, "Take no notice of a critic, because there'll be never a statue put up to one."
Wow.
And I've kept that quote all my life, and so whenever I come across somebody that maybe is a bit critical or a bit negative about something I'm doing, you know, I just think, yeah, well, you won't have a statue, but I guess you're just one of those pigeons that does things on statues.
You know, what's interesting is that you said when you read that question, you thought about it some, and then you gave the answer you just gave. But do you recall that a little bit earlier in the call? It just shows you how you are a guy who doesn't let negative impact, because you talked about your wife's breast cancer experience, which that can't be positive for anyone, and obviously then the positive that came out of it, which just is, you didn't even, I was going to think I wasn't even going to ask the question, because you already answered the question about a negative that ended up having a pretty amazing positive. But it shows that really, like you said, you let those negatives sort of roll off, and you try to, you know, you try to just get beyond them. So anyway, that's a very cool one. A little different question. Tell me a book that you've read recently, or, you know, we've got the internet now, so it could have been a blog or whatever, but that recently really had an influence on your life, especially if it is a book, because our watchers will pick up books that other people recommend. So.
Well, I thought about this question, and but the book, Who Moved My Cheese? And,
cool. And we're seeing it really well, so it's good.
And so that was that little book. I chose that one because, you know, behind me you can see there's a bookcase full of books, and but I chose that one because it's the only personal development book my dad read, and he read it and he said everybody should read that. But I think this little book, it's so easy to read, and it's got some simple principles. You know, it really is. You know, amazing way to deal with change, and it's just about these two little mice that when two mice, they start planning for new cheese because the old cheese is going to run out, and they move on. They're looking for change. They're looking for adaptation, and that's me. And the other two mice, they just sit there waiting and hoping the cheese will come, and they die. And so that's a favourite book. A book that I love to give to lots of young people and old these days. I give it to anybody. And Dr. Seuss.
Okay.
Oh, the places you will go.
Oh, the places you will go.
So it's quirky, but you know, I think we take life too seriously, and so that's why I picked those two books out.
One of the things that's really cool about books today, and I knew it, but I really hadn't focused on it as much because I get so much now that I put over Kindle, is that you can buy used books on Amazon for is sometimes 5%, because this is a book a friend of mine gave me just today, and Brian, I hadn't even looked at this, right? You threw this to me the first time. So this was bought on Amazon. I don't know if you can see it. Deb, can they see it? It's been written all over. Whoever had this has put all kinds of notes and everything. So, I mean, as I read this, it's going to actually be more interesting to me, because I'm going to be looking at the notes that whoever had this book before that they had taken. And then Deb pointed something out to me when we were traveling. I don't know if she remembers this. just recently. I guess I'd heard it, but I didn't know it. That anybody now can put a little, well, you can always do this, but there's a trend moving to where people will take sort of like a mailbox that's just got a plexiglass cover on it and put it out on their yard, and then they just put books in it, and it's basically their own little library. And the intent is that people can just walk by and take the books out. Hopefully they'll return them, but they can put more back in. I don't know if that's a movement you've seen at all where you're at, but I just noticed it for the first time, and I actually didn't know what this box was, and she pointed out, and she knew what it was. The rest of you were aware of it, right, Janine? Yeah, so I think that was pretty cool. I've actually come to the end. I've got one more question, and I'm going to open it up to the group here in the room and others. But let me just ask this last question, and then let's just chat a little bit. We've got about 10 minutes left before we'll wrap her up here, but because we started a little bit late. Graham, this is one that John Lee Dumas always asks on his podcast, which is Entrepreneur on Fire. And I have gotten so many really interesting and cool answers to this that I really look forward to yours. And it goes like this. Let's say you woke up tomorrow and you found you were on another planet that was just like Earth. All of your daily needs were cared for. You figured that out. But you realize all you have is your laptop and $500. What would you be doing over the next 7 days?
That's a great question, and one of the things that I guess I'm going to get to take with me is my knowledge and experience. And as somebody who really enjoys teaching, if there's I'm assuming there's some other people there that want to learn.
Absolutely, it's just like Earth, but it's not where you've been.
I'm just going to get teaching, so I'll use that $500 maybe to create a website and get some promotion out there, and we'll put a stockmanship school on, and I'll teach some people some stock schools, and until I got enough money, and then I'll to get a ticket to Bozeman, and I'll move to Bozeman, and I'll base myself there. So I'll be able to teach from there and fish on my days off, and that'll be called heaven.
All right. Well, this will be a little transition, and then everybody in the room here and anybody online, think of some questions. I'm going to have you come out here sometime, and you're going to change your mind, and you're going to want it to be in the foothills of the Rockies near me, so we can be close to each other, because I guarantee I can show you some fly fishing in some areas that are just as good as the Gallatin or the Madison or the Missouri. And then we'll be close enough to each other that we'll get done some of these initiatives that we've talked about. So anyway, that's the seed I'm going to plant. You said it briefly, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about what your plans are for the podcast that you're going to be doing.
Okay. A couple of years ago, Wayne, I had this idea to. I actually was talking to a lady called Dr. Christine Jones, and she's actually quite well known in the US, and she's a soil scientist and done a huge amount of work. And what I realized when I was talking to her is that none of her work's really, it hasn't been published, or she hasn't got a training program or those sorts of things. And so what I did is I put together a teleseminar series where I interviewed her, and then the next interview was a lady called Nora Gedgaudas, who actually if you go back to my screen here, Deb, I'll show you a screenshot, or show you the image of.
Move it over just a little bit towards your face, just a tiny bit. There you go.
Yep. So Nora Gedgaudas wrote a book, Primal Body, Primal Mind, and so she was my second interview, and then I realized, oh my gosh, there's the link, because she was talking about human health and the primal paleo diet and optimizing health, and here's Christine. She was talking about soil health, and one of the things that Christine said on her webinar was that there's 6 billion organisms in a healthy teaspoon of soil. And I went, wow, 7 billion humans are relying on that healthy teaspoon of soil. Let's create a teleseminar series. And so I actually got into 4 teleseminars and it exploded. I had 700 people from 20 countries, and they wanted transcriptions and they wanted CDs and they wanted a whole lot of stuff. So I actually shut it down because I just couldn't keep up until I could find somebody. And actually this weekend I've got a young girl, Sophie Robertson, who's going to move here to Bathurst, and we're going to reignite Life in a Teaspoon in a way that we haven't seen before, and it'll be 3 podcasts a week. That's the plan at this point. It's probably 2 to 3 months out from actually launching, but we want to be able to serve people not just with the podcast, but because one of the things I've realised, Wayne, is that audio CDs are huge. You know, and so I do interviews with all sorts of guests as part of my mastermind. In fact, I've got 55 hours on CD. And so we're not just going to do podcasts, because lots of people like to sit in their car and in their truck and listen to audio CDs. And so
that would expand on that. That's one of the things you and I talk quite a bit about. And you know, we can't forget that, especially in this farming and ranching community, where a lot of people spend a lot of time in their pickup truck, a podcast would work, but the reality is that still has to probably be on something they're used to listening to, which is a CD or a DVD, which they listen to rather than watch, right? And you and I talked about that, and I still think we're in a place where we've got to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. It's you know, when someone joins our mastermind, you know, it's all about the marketing stuff, but the bonus they get is they get one of those 4 pack CDs every other month, and you know, I continue to do interviews, but they come back to me and they say, you know, I get phone calls and they say, I've just spent 5 hours in the car, and I just learned so much from listening to that person. So I've interviewed people all over the world, just like we are, and you know, it's timeless. People get to learn and expand. I mean, you know, there's a lady recently that I interviewed, Pam Bartha, who cured herself of MS, who actually was on the same stage as you when I met you in San Diego. And you know, I've got people in Outback Australia listening to people like Pam, and you know, people out there have health issues just like they do in the city.
Sure. Any other questions in the room here?
I've got more of a
yeah, John has got one.
I've got more of a practical question, just because you sound like a very knowledgeable individual as far as taking care of cattle. So part of my certified organic system, obviously, as I'm sure you guys understand as well as anybody, that my soil, when I use the hydroponic cocoa bags, I have to do something recycling, you know, it would be referred to as recycled or whatever with my cocoa once I've ran it for a year. And one of my neighbors raises cattle on the 50 acres right next to us, and we were having a discussion about whether or not he could feed that leftover cocoa core to his cows. And he did an extensive amount of research and found no positives or negatives towards whether or not cocoa is, you know, the husk off of a coconut. I'm sure you know what cocoa core is something that could be fed to his cows, and that way I could use it as that's how I recycle my core at the end of my season. Is that something you know anything about?
And Graham, he was sitting a little. Did you hear that? Did you hear Jonah's question?
Yeah, I did. From my understanding, I forget what we call it here, but the coconut, it's very highly nutritious if it's what I'm thinking of. In fact, I can't think what it's called here. But I think it would be. I mean, I eat coconut all the time. I think coconut would be great.
But it's the husk, though. You know what I mean? It's not the meat. It's the hair on the outside of the plant. Yeah. That's what I use to grow that's my substrate.
I mean, I'll offer a little bit. And Graham, before I answer, I'm going to ask you a little bit differently. I know you have poisonous plants that are indigenous or even exotic, where you have cattle grazing on large expanses of land. We certainly have that here for all of our livestock grazing. And if you introduce something that's poisonous that an animal hasn't had any experience with, that's when it's a problem, because they could not know. But otherwise, if you've got poisonous plants in a place where cattle or any kind of livestock are regular, they're not going to eat it. I'm going to give a real simple answer to your question. I think unless you just knew there were some toxins and some poisons in it, frankly, if they ate it, you're going to know there isn't a problem. Now, I wouldn't want to be a cattle rancher who was the first guy trying that, if it's me answering it, but I would probably be willing to do it with a cow or two, and then watch them, obviously, and see what they do. Have you fed? Do you know whether they'll eat it? That's the other thing. If you mixed it or whatever, they can be pretty picky in what they eat. So
we haven't done anything with it because of that fear. He's a small guy. I mean, he's only got 10 cattle. To lose one is pretty devastating to him. So he didn't really want to risk it. But he was pretty darn sure looking at it that he thought his cattle would just tear it up, is what he felt. So yeah.
Well, I'll take that on as a challenge and do some research for you and the thought on that. But
good, I got some bags. I'll give you.
I can't imagine, as I think about it physiologically, that as Grahame stated, that there'd be a problem with it, honestly.
Nice.
Put a bag over the neighbour's cows.
Yeah. yeah. Any of the words that he was using that are obviously Australian in description that you can questions on mob grazing. Janine and I were talking the other day about grazing, and I call it, and it wasn't Janine, I was talking, you were with me maybe, but I was talking with somebody else, and we call it bunch grazing, and then whoever I was with said, well, is that the same as mob grazing? And I said, yes, it is, but we use a little different description. So, what other questions? Anybody? I could ask a bunch of them. We're coming about 2 or 3 minutes before we want to end up here. You have any questions for us, Grahame, or anything else you'd want to end with?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, use of words? And I've spent a little too much time over there already, I guess, because when I'm talking to somebody in the US, I'm able to just change my language. So, here we don't talk about a ranch, we talk about a station. And we go mustering, and we don't go and gather a mob, and they're not fields, they're paddocks, and we've got lots of language differences, but I guess spending so much time, I spent probably 60 hours in the car with Bud, and he probably wasn't somebody that really was social and wanted to talk to people, but I realized when you got in a car, he couldn't go anywhere, and so you could listen to him. So I learned a lot of the language, and getting down to the coffee shop at 5 o'clock in the morning, and visiting. We don't visit, we have a yarn.
Wow, have a yarn. That's great. Well, Grahame, this has just been great fun. I've looked forward for this for some time. I really look forward to your podcast. I'm going to end with one last question and then let you go. You're going to do 3 a week. How many are you going to backlog before you start, so you don't get into this place to where it's Friday and you're realizing, what, we haven't got anything scheduled yet for next week, or something of that nature. And you probably know that Ed Rush, who we both know, and then even John Lee Dumas. John Lee Dumas records 10 sessions at once. So his is daily. So he's not out there having to worry about doing something every day. How are you going to do it? What's your plan for that?
Well, Sophie's the plan is to have at least probably somewhere between 20 and 30 already done before it even launches.
Right.
But it's something that I'm still cautious about, and saying to her, I think we just need to get a lot to get it going and getting it started. I haven't totally decided on exactly what it'll be, because the thing I notice with podcasts is the trouble with the people doing 7 days, it's too much. You can't consume it.
Right. I started with Dumas, and I was listening probably for a couple of weeks every day, and then you just start to slack off, and then you just can't consume it. I mean, that's right. That's absolutely true.
So yeah, so we don't want to take away from it, but I think initially when we launch, it'll do that. Just a lot of it's to do with how to get ranked in iTunes.
Right. Yep. Well,
Yep.
Graham, this has been awesome. We're kind of right up against an hour, and we started a little bit late. We thank everybody out there for being with us. I hope you've enjoyed it. Remember, we'll be back in 2 weeks with Dan Pfeffer, who's going to talk about his experiences with market farming. And am I mispronouncing it?
It's Ben.
Ben. I keep
Sorry.
saying Dan, and it's Ben. You know, I should remember the name of the guy who's going to. So it's Ben Pfeffer. I will get it right. And Graham, thank you so much. Please say hi to Ashley and get that fly rod ready. And when you get out here, or when I get down there, we're going to do some fly fishing together.
We'll come to Colorado. Sounds good to me. And if anybody wants to get any, be in touch with me or get that audio, then just go to the website. I'm more than happy to communicate with people. And gee, I'd love to come over there and teach some stockmanship skills.
Oh, well, we're going to get that done. So we talked about talking about that. So anyway, live from Berthoud, Colorado, we're going to sign off here. And again, come back and listen to Economics in Action in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Graham.
Hey, everybody. Bye.